All right, so we should get started with the afternoon session. So in the morning, we had talks on with the theme of water sciences. Now we are focusing on agriculture, and the first talk is by Zhenong Jin.
All right. Yeah, thanks for the invitation. And it's actually a little bit of pressure to be the first one in the afternoon because it's a perfect time for taking a nap, right? So I'm not going to too technical. I'm trying to set up some background picture why we care about agriculture, environmental science, and what AI applications can advance the field. So to start with, we talk about the agriculture, talk about environment, and we talk about climate change. What's the relationship between this guy? Okay, so we actually had a science paper coming next month. Is identified that we know agriculture, especially food system, has already been a troublemaker for the environment, and the climate change will intensify those negative impacts, and they will accelerate the process that feedback to climate change itself. So as one example, we can see, so climate change, temperature goes up, precipitation, some places gets drier and some places get flooded. So they affect the land clearing, which threaten the biodiversity loss, which then feedback to the climate change through the greenhouse gas emission. So in this talk, I will mostly focusing on the greenhouse gas mitigation and the carbon sequestration. So agriculture has contributed to a quarter of the global greenhouse gas emission. 14% is directly from the agriculture activity, and 10% coming from clearing the land. Then you expose the soil to the air, then they decompose the organic soil, which turns into methane, CO2, those kind of greenhouse gases. For the US, agriculture system is responsible for 10% of the national emission. So we are thinking to mitigate this 10%. Now, the side benefits actually is if you can manage this 10% well, you also bring benefit to the water, air pollution control, and also prevent the land degradation. Now, even though agriculture is currently not the biggest sector for emission, but the thing about is those low-hanging fruits from the energy sector, transportation sector, they have been all picked, then we have to face the agriculture. Okay, so through the Inflation Reduction Act, lots of money goes to the USDA, and they have already started invest billions of dollars for the next 10 years to improve the livelihood in the rural area and also combat climate change through fundings and incentivizing the climate smart practices. So what are the climate smart practices? For example, transfer from tillage to no-till or conservation till, adding cover crop to the bare ground soil. As the right-hand side picture shows, they want to sequester the greenhouse gas emission to the ground, and that can turn into carbon credits then sold to farmers to increase their income. So left-hand side listed the basic steps, how you can create a market-driven solution is we set up a benchmark knowing farmers, what are they doing right now, and then introduce new management practices. If we can verify how much change they actually made, then we can monetize those credits and give money to make payments to the farmer. So the tricky part is we most of the time, mostly we only know the action, and we know this farmer applied this practices, but the outcome is different. Depends on what soil, what climate, what crops, and how they were actually managed. So action does not equal to outcome. That's why being able to verify the exact carbon removal is extremely important for this accurate, transparent, and science-driven market. So then the question I wrote down is how can we quantify the agricultural greenhouse gas emission potentially for every field in the US? So we synthesize the problem into a general equation idea. It's an interaction between the crop type, crop traits, with management and with the environmental condition. Now the cross mark here, it means interaction. And basically it's like how do we have a good mathematical representation for those to capture those interactive process. So, and oftentimes the environmental information is easy to get. We have soil, digital soil map, we have climate data, weather data. But if we only using those data as the right-hand side panel shows, we got low performance in predicting the neck ecosystem exchange, that's the CO2 flux between land and the atmosphere. If we add management information, we bump up the prediction performance. If we can precisely know everything, we can have a very high performance. This is achievable at some of the so-called gold standard sites where we have very detailed measurement, but unfortunately, we can only afford the limit of those gold sites. So the problem becomes, okay, at a few sites, we have very detailed measurement, we have almost perfect model. How can we transfer those models to other places? And this is a big question we want to address, is how to enable an accurate and scalable predictive tool using AI. And here I just listed a brief non-exhaustive points like where AI can help. Is derive the hyperlocal information, like we have so many satellites, we can extract the management information, crop traits from the satellite imagery using AI. And we want to improve the prediction and the key for the key process using KGML or PIN. And of course, AI can help us accelerate so that the model can be deployed over millions of croplands in the US. So, and which showed this similar diagram in the morning. There are process-based model for centric research and the machine learning centric. And we are mostly going through the second path, is have how we can teach machine learning model, a neural network, to gain more domain knowledge. So as a demonstration case, we try to predict the nitrous oxide, N2O, which is a very potent greenhouse gas, right? Almost 300 times more powerful than CO2. Okay, and on the left-hand side, that's an observation. As you can see, the spatially, temporally, they change a lot. So what we call hotspots, hot moment pattern of the nitrous oxide emission. So then we derived a hierarchical neural network to mimic the biophysical and biogeochemical drivers for the nitrous oxide production. And as you can see, the red curve was the KGML model, which matched the observation black dot much better compared to the pure machine learning model or the process-based model. And it does better job in the auto sample prediction. But now the real holy grail here is how can we predict the soil carbon change and the greenhouse CO2 emission. This slide give you an illustration. If you don't have so much biology but knowledge, is how the carbon was actually produced and then allocated through different components of the ecosystem and how they goes into the below ground. So through photosynthesis, we have GPP, the gross primary production, and then the plants like or crops like human, they needed to graze, and then part of the CO2 goes back into the atmosphere, but what's left is the dry matter in the leaves, in the trunk, in the fruits. And when they die, they will have litter goes into the soil, gradually become the soil organic carbon. And for the past decades, scientists have been using process-based model to simulate those carbon-related process, and we have to deal with the energy cycle, water cycle, carbon cycle to understand the different stresses for growing crops. So with the KGML, this is the hierarchical structure we designed to mimic the very complex ecosystems. And the hierarchical structure, again, some of them are intentionally for the more of the soil physical process like moisture, temperature. Some of them are for the allocation process, and some of them are for the like leaf phenology, those morphology related process. And we use a multitask learning strategy because the change in soil carbon can be essentially written as a mass balance equation. So if we were able to predict each of the term on the right-hand side, we should be able to predict the soil carbon. And then we took multiple strategy to improve the KGML performance. This paper was published in Nature Communication earlier this year, and the lead author, Li Chen, was sits there. So for all the technical questions, he will be the person to ask. To start with, we have the pure machine learning model without anything. And that's R².4. If we assimilate the satellite-based GPP measurement, we can immediately see an increase in the prediction performance. Now, here's a pre-training, knowledge-guided pre-training using process-based model to generate a large sample of synthetic data, then pre-train the neural network. So they will be better initialized. And introducing knowledge-guided structure and knowledge-guided learning, the loss function. And at the end, we have the KGML ag carbon. Here, this slide basically shows the different validation performance, like make prediction in the crop yield. It also shows the similar pattern, like in the morning, with very small training sample size. KGML can outperform much better compared to the pure machine learning. But as the data size goes up, the difference becomes smaller. And compared to the Flux Tower, which is the only observational benchmark data, we do have a pretty good correlation between the prediction and the measurements. And this is the validation through those large Earth system models. And the KGML also gets closer. Now, we predicted variable individually on the right-hand side. When we add them up together, do we get a better prediction? Well, for the soil carbon change, it turns out for the soil carbon stock, like the total soil carbon, we have pretty reasonable prediction. But for the delta SOC, the carbon change, it is still challenging. So for about half of the sites, we can get the direction right. And for the remaining, there are some still missing parts. But this is already way better than the existing status quo because the soil carbon is a so weird, challenging problem to tackle with. And then we start thinking, okay, what's missing there? Now there are scale match, the resolution of satellite versus where the measurement is coming from. They don't match up. And there could be unbalanced distribution. There may be some of the management information not incorporated, like how much residue was left in the field versus harvested by farmers. So to further improve the KGML performance, we developed this KGML-based data simulation. So basically, it's finding a way to better use external observational data and talk to the hidden layer inside the neural network. The example here shows, well, we use a encoder-decoder process to update the first hidden layer using satellite observed GPP. Of course, if you have a measurement, satellite can give you measurement on leaf area index, the greenness of the tree crops, can give you the evapotranspiration, kind of measuring the moisture status, and can give you the soil moisture. So they can be used to update different hidden layers, depends on the hierarchical structure. So it ends up two things, of course, with the data simulation, accuracy increase. But compared to the traditional ensemble common filter, you don't see the zigzag pattern because we are playing with a very high level hidden layer. And also, we want better represent the human activity, the management practices. So former PhD student Yifeng did this study to incorporate the cover crop and the tillage directly as the external forcing to the KGML. So a quick review of how we build a KGML ag is we use, this is the basic structure for build a machine learning pipeline. So for the architecture design, we introduce the knowledge. For the initialization, we can use the synthetic data to provide a pre-training. And for the knowledge guided loss, we can introduce like a conservation or mass or the energy balance. And for the training, we can using knowledge guided extrapolation, etc. So this is the next step as we build the LLM-based ensemble KGML, which Xiaowei has covered in the morning. And then another thing I want to make a note is, even though maybe the ensemble model does not outperform individual model in one specific site, it has a much better generalization because we as a domain modeler, we know different models they can perform better in certain places. So the balancing and be able to achieve a generally good performance is the most helpful to the implementation program. Agriculture closely related to water quality. So this is an SF project. We use a knowledge-guided graph neural network to first simulate individual fields and then aggregate it to the catchment level, to the watershed level, and to the basin level. And we, in the process, we introduced a low-cost nanosensor, which is coming from Professor Cui's lab. And yeah, KGML has a greater potential, and agriculture with, because it's mostly related to the socioeconomic activity. And I think there's huge interest from the society to embrace. Okay.
Thank you. Any questions?
So this is great. And this brought really a question that's been bugging me for a little while. How do we know with KGML models that we don't overfit, particularly in a case like this, right? Where we don't have any other, like traditional machine learning has good metrics, reasonable metrics of overfitting that don't translate very well into KGML framework. How do we control for overfitting here? How do we know that this is not what's going on there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so my answer was, with the existing data, can we address that question? Probably not, especially for agriculture data, super noisy. And so we are lobbying USDA, try to set up a different tier system of data collection. So the first tier, you may have some gold standard site with a very detailed measurement where you develop the model. And then the second tier data system may come from literature, may come from some random trial plots where you have some measurements and you can validate the model. But in order for the model to be like usable and avoid the overfitting issue, we have to go into, let's say, a random field from farmer's farm, right? And we may have some samples, but withhold the data, then test the model. And if the model does not, well, it goes way out of the normal range, we have to go back and fix the issue. But those tiered systems, first people have to get the point, like there are different data. When we talk about data, they have different data quality. And then we have to set up the system And if we don't do now, 5 years later, we're still asking the same question.
Other questions?
Okay. Thank you.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.